Hello and welcome to Politics, Political Science 325. This is a transformation from Politics 393, Politics of the Middle East. I use Politics of the Middle East and North Africa, Politics of the Middle East, Politics of the Modern Middle East, loosely interchangeably. My preferred title is Politics of the Middle East and North Africa, but if you see anything that says Middle East politics or Politics of the Modern Middle East, assume they're all the same. So welcome. This is spring 2019. I am Professor Evan Heitkamp Boucher, and you're listening to this as your first lecture of the first class. I'm recording this and future lectures largely in real time with students. I read the course as I go through with you. This is my third time teaching this course, and so I'm in addition to preparing it each semester, and originally I've read the materials probably 6 or 7 times, and so I have it kind of burned into my brain. Now, the reason I continue to read along with students is because I feel like it's important as an online instructor to sort of simulate the classroom environment to the best of my abilities. The 2019 version, I think, will be a little better, a little lower work, and we'll discuss that here in a bit. So, without further ado, the spring 2019 changes from the original lectures linked from spring 2018 involve 3 papers with the deadlines associated with it, as well as 3 tests. They're mostly on the same day, but I broke them apart in case I wanted to change the deadlines to make the work a little easier, or if there was some sort of student event. The goal was really to make the course as easy as possible for students. And so, in addition to 3 papers, 3 tests, and a geography quiz, which for my part as an instructor of Middle East politics is very important, that students leaving a Middle East politics course know where the countries are. And this includes North Africa and the countries adjacent to North Africa. So think about it from Western Sahara to Iran. That would be your large tract that you need to have memorized. And there's details on that in Blackboard. And that's also due on the 3rd. Tests, papers, all individual. They should all be done alone. I know students know ways to cheat on all of this, even with a proctor. I would encourage you not to, by virtue of hoping, I hope to get some information out of this course and develop those kind of skills that we're culminating towards. I know many of the students in the current course roster that I've looked at, like previous online iterations, are sort of taking this as their general international requirement. And while I am sensitive to sort of new students of politics, and this course was driven towards people without a background in the Middle East, it still requires the sort of upperclassmen for undergraduate, upper class skills, critical thinking, articulating complex thoughts, ironic given the error there. And overall, I think it's really important for students to sort of be aware of what the expectations are for upper level courses. And so I've got 3 papers for this course and 3 tests. This is much better in terms of workload than the original online iteration, which required students to do weekly papers in order to force you to keep up with the readings. Because this course is larger, and because I felt like students weren't given a chance to breathe during the last iteration of the course, I've trimmed down the work, but the work quality has gone up. To that end, there's no longer any extra credit. Any references in lectures to extra credit that aren't specifically emailed to the spring 2019 cohort are no longer valid. Those sort of Easter eggs were largely sort of cheeky, sarcastic references to things like Rick Astley and Never Gonna Give You Up and all the kind of online culture things to see if students were actually listening to the lectures. In this iteration, there will be no extra credit because the work has gone down, and the expectations for the work are a little higher. That said, students should be able to pass this course readily if they do all the work. Because we're not doing any in-person lectures that require hours upon hours, there is slightly higher reading than the in-person versions of this course, but I assure you it's mostly extremely readable, and the few academic articles that are a little tougher are front-loaded. And so, without further ado, here's the criteria that we're using to evaluate your writing, and most of this course is writing. The take-home tests are open book. You can write whatever you'd like, but you're not going to have time in a week from the test opening till the test closing to do all the research. I will come down extremely hard on cheating and plagiarism. It's very important that you do your own work. And part of the reason I like an essay test is I feel like it helps you express yourself a little better. Multiple choice might be easy to grade as a professor, it might be easy to take as a student, but my hope here is that you will develop your skills to evaluate arguments and understand the world in a new way. And the sort of 6 things that I'm grading you on are your thesis, your structure, your use of evidence, your analysis, your logic and argumentation, and your mechanics. So in terms of the thesis, what I'm looking for, and this is my own personally written criteria. I did modify this from another university's rubric, but I think this is the right way to go about it, which is that, the thesis is easily identifiable, plausible, novel, sophisticated, insightful, and clear, right? And the reason I'm looking for these things is I need to know the argument you're making. And more important than anything else for college courses is that I need to see your sourcing for the argument you're making, right? So if you think about an argument as sort of a wedding cake, right? That the thesis is the top layer of the wedding cake, and the very big base of it is the evidence that you're using to base it on, right? And the layers between are your evidence and your mini thesis, right? So you've got your evidence, your citation references, you've got the way you're articulating that evidence and the way you're ordering it, you've got the sort of argument you're making to contribute to your overall thesis, right? The mini thesis referenced down here, the topic sentence, right? Of something, say a paragraph, right? And that builds up to your main thesis. So I'm looking for a clear argument, clear evidence that's academic, that is well thought out, that is kind of a polemic, no sort of retroactive historical revisionism in light of current sort of beliefs. And that applies to domestic political beliefs, whether or not you're a sort of American Democrat, American Republican, Turkish AKP member. It does not matter to me. You need to make an academic argument and you need to justify it. And you need to take into account contravening evidence. So if you've got something that says, oh man, the Mamluks had a wonderful administrative state, and they meant it about one particular thing, right? The Mamluks had a wonderful administrative state in terms of construction in Cairo, let's say. And the rest of the book says the Mamluks had very poor administrative capacity relative to the Turks who were invading. What you're doing in that case is you're cherry picking evidence, and I am going to be looking for that as well, right? Conversely, when we head over to this right-hand column here about the DEF work, right? It's mainly lack of effort, honestly. Like more than anything, it's lack of effort. If you get an F or a D+, you've not sort of sufficiently communicated effort. And a large part of doing well in this course is just putting in the time. If you wait till the last minute on the paper or the test, you're going to fail all of it. It's not something that can be sort of spit run off the side, right? So what I'd encourage you to do is I'd encourage you to follow along week by week, which, I can't force you to do. I'm not going to put a bunch of mini quizzes in here and harass you. Everyone taking this course is a fully fledged adult, right? But what I'm hoping for is a comprehensive understanding of the material that has enough time to breathe, right? I want you to be able to read the week's readings, think about it a bit, and do that, every week or maybe even every other week, right? I'm not expecting you to follow along verbatim, but the more you follow along, the more you cohere to the weekly schedule, the more likely it is that you'll be able to ask questions that will help you on the test, because I'm going to draft the test and release them a week before they're due, and then that's it, right? You're not going to know the topic questions, but the biggest way I can recommend for you to keep in mind what will probably be on the test is knowing the discussion questions from every section you read, right? You don't need to respond to the discussion questions other than one discussion question per section per paper you need to write, but it would behoove you to learn what each section what each week's topic papers require, and what you're looking at personally, right? So it might help for you to email other students and pool together your responses to different discussion questions. Maybe you each want to answer a different weekly discussion question, send it to me for grading, but also send it to each other with enough time that you can hand in your test with one another, having studied some of the same materials, right? Because that's an efficient way to learn. My hope is that your kind of discussion questions on the weekly basis, which, those are entirely your guiding questions for the reading, will help you pick out the right data for doing well on the test. And feel free to email me or ask me to make kind of another video to answer these questions. So when we head into spring 2019, the lectures are largely distinct from the material covered in the readings. I recorded them with an eye for them to be supplementary, not summary. But if you need a little more help understanding how things fit together, please email me. I'll record a 5-10 minute lecture beforehand. I am around this spring. I'm not traveling very much. Now, questions about the readings should be written to the professor by the deadline of the week and will be answered in video lectures. If you want me to make a email response or a video response to your request, to your question about the material or the previous lecture, I need it by the deadline of that week, right? So, if week 1 ends on, I'm recording this on Sunday the 6th, if week 1 ends on January 13th, I need those questions by January 13th. And this doesn't apply for the pre-reading, but it would be good to have that in mind, right? The pre-reading, you can do at your leisure. I recommend it for your test, though, because it will make things a lot easier on you. Many lectures like this one will have a pre-lecture for spring 2019. I'm doing my corrections here. I'm doing this sort of summary and to help kind of like bring things into focus and let you know that I'm also joining you on this journey of kind of discovery of this fascinating region of the world. So in terms of changes and errors will be corrected from the 2018 edition of this course. As I mentioned, there are a number of small errors. It's usually, somebody's title, a specific year, right? In one instance, I, despite having studied it, forgot that the calendar year of the Russian Revolution was 1917, 1916, which was another major event in World War I. And those sorts of things will get ironed out in the lecture, although feel free to send me kind of factual correction notes. There are still a few things in the old lectures that need correcting, but I figured no one would want to listen to a 15-minute correction. So with that in mind, I'm looking forward to kind of studying this with you. I'm looking forward to having you as students, and I hope this sort of summary video for the beginning helps clear up kind of expectations on workload and what I look for when I'm reading people's work. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure getting to sort of meet you, many of you, by email, and I hope to hear from all of you before the end of this course.